10 experts failed, then CEO hires Clumsy Waitress to close billion-dollar deal.
Before we begin the story, you can help us a lot by subscribing to our channel and sharing this video. The voice of Pierce Vance, CEO of Vance Engineering, was quiet, yet it cut through the silence of the top-floor boardroom like a razor. His elite team of strategists and engineers, men and women who collectively charged thousands of dollars an hour, shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs. On the holographic display in the center of the table, the schematics for the multi-billion-dollar Odyssey project glowed. It was the contract of a lifetime, a chance to build the nation's first high-speed rail network. But hidden within the proposal's endless pages was a clause so devious, so brilliantly constructed, it had brought the sharpest minds in the industry to a dead halt, a poison pill. Pierce's gaze swept across the room. "I'm paying for solutions. So far, all I've heard are expensive excuses." The heavy oak door creaked open. Chloe entered, balancing a tray with a fresh pot of coffee and a pitcher of ice water. Her movements were careful, deliberate, a constant battle between her mind and her body. As she navigated the perimeter of the room, her ears caught the tail end of the problem being restated. Her brain, which saw the world as a series of interconnected puzzles, immediately lit up, and the answer was so simple, so obvious, she almost smiled. Distracted by the sudden, satisfying click of the solution in her head, her foot caught the edge of the plush rug. She lurched forward, the tray tilting precariously. A few drops of ice water sloshed onto the polished floor. I'm so sorry, Mr. Vance," she stammered, her face flushing crimson as all eyes turned to her. She rushed to set the tray down, her apology tangled up with the solution that was still buzzing in her thoughts. "It's just, you're looking at it backwards. It's not a linear problem. It's a parallel distribution. You just have to invert the dependency model. Oh my God, I'm so sorry." She clamped a hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with horror at what she'd just done. The room, already silent, became a vacuum. The experts stared at her, their expressions a mixture of shock and utter disdain. Who was this clumsy server to speak in their meeting? But Pierce Vance wasn't looking at them. His gaze was fixed on Chloe, his frustration instantly gone, replaced by a look of sharp, predatory focus. He leaned forward, his eyes narrowed. Chloe didn't wait for a response. Mortified, she turned and fled the room, the sound of her frantic footsteps echoing in the terrifying, absolute silence she left behind. The next day was torture. Every footstep in the hallway made Chloe jump. Every time a manager walked into the pantry, her heart hammered against her ribs. She spent the morning convinced that each coffee she brewed would be her last. She was just waiting for the inevitable tap on the shoulder from HR. By lunchtime, when no one had come to fire her, a new, colder fear settled in. Maybe they were just waiting for Mr. Vance to arrive so he could do it himself. She was wiping down a stainless steel counter when the pantry door slid open. It was him. Pierce Vance stood in the doorway, his custom-tailored suit looking absurdly out of place next to the industrial coffee machines and boxes of tea bags. The low-level chatter in the room died instantly. People suddenly found reasons to be somewhere else, melting away until it was just the two of them. Chloe froze, her hand gripping a damp cloth. "Mr. Vance, I am so sorry about yesterday. I don't know what—" "I'm not interested in yesterday," he cut in, his voice calm and direct. He walked closer, his eyes scanning her as if she were a complex equation. "I have another problem." "A problem?" "A logistical one," he said, ignoring her confusion. "We're hosting a shareholder event. Two of our most important keynote speakers are demanding the same 9 a.m. time slot on the same day. One is in New York, the other is in Chicago. We can't appear to prioritize one over the other, and we can't move the date. The board says it's impossible to accommodate both. What do you do?" He watched her, expecting, he wasn't sure what. A long pause, a confused shrug. But Chloe's mind was already in motion. The variables clicked into place, not as a personnel issue, but as a simple time zone and resource management puzzle. She answered in less than 3 seconds. It's not impossible. New York is on Eastern Time. Chicago is on Central. Their 9 a.m. slots are actually an hour apart, she said, thinking aloud. You put the New York speaker on first. While he's talking, the company jet is already on its way to Chicago. It's a short flight. The jet picks up the second speaker and flies him to the Chicago venue. It's tight, but it works. To make them both feel important, you don't call it a scheduling conflict. You brand it. The sunrise session in New York and the primetime opener in Chicago. You make it about prestige, not logistics. Silence. Pierce didn't move. He just stared at her, and in his eyes, something shifted. The hard, critical edge of a CEO interrogating an employee dissolved, placed by a look of raw, undisguised admiration. The skepticism was gone. It was as if he was seeing her, the real her, for the very first time. He saw the brilliant, analytical mind he'd been desperately searching for, hidden away in the company pantry. I've had a team of 6 people working on that problem for a week, he said softly, a hint of awe in his voice. He took a final step toward her. I don't want you to work in this pantry anymore. She finally found her voice, her heart pounding. You're firing me? No, he said, his gaze intense. I'm hiring you. I want you to be my private advisor. I want you to help me win the Odyssey project. Chloe's new reality was a glass-walled office next to Pierce Vance's. It felt less like a promotion and more like being the main exhibit at a zoo. Everyone stared. The same executives who wouldn't have given her a second glance in the pantry now watched her with a mixture of suspicion and disbelief. Her first official strategy meeting was brutal. She sat at the massive boardroom table, the memory of spilling water on its polished surface still fresh in her mind. The head of engineering, a stern man named Peterson, was presenting a new roadblock. The client is demanding a revised timeline. They want Phase 1 completed 3 months earlier, but the material procurement plan makes that impossible. The team debated for 20 minutes, suggesting more spending, more manpower, brute force solutions that were clunky and expensive. Chloe stayed silent, her notepad filling with diagrams. Finally, Pierce turned to her, his voice cutting through the noise. Chloe, anything? All eyes swiveled in her direction. Peterson's lips thinned into a dismissive line, a clear look of, "Here we go," on his face. Chloe's voice was quiet but steady. You're all looking at the procurement plan as a single linear process. It's not. The problem isn't the timeline, it's the sequence. The regulations require on-site inspectors for foundational work and framework construction, and we're waiting for one to finish before starting the other. She tapped her pen on her notepad. But if you bifurcate the supply chain and reroute the non-essential framework materials through the secondary hubs, you can run the foundational and framework construction phases in parallel, not in sequence. She pointed to a detail in the schematics. It saves 4 months, not 3, and it actually cuts costs by reducing warehousing redundancy. Peterson scoffed, seizing his chance to put the server in her place. That's a cute theory, but the secondary hubs don't have the capacity to handle that kind of parallel load. They do, Chloe countered softly, without missing a beat. If you factor in the average 18% logistical downtime from Hub 1 due to union regulations, you're looking at the stated capacity in the manual, not the functional, real-world capacity. The bandwidth is there, we're just not using it. The room fell silent. Peterson stared at his own data, his face slowly turning a shade of red. He had been so sure of himself, and she had just dismantled his entire argument with a simple, elegant piece of logic he had completely overlooked. Pierce leaned back in his chair, a slow, dangerous smile playing on his lips. "Well, Peterson," he asked the silent room, "it seems we have our new timeline. Thank you, Chloe." He had done it in front of everyone. He hadn't just backed her, he had handed her the victory. The experts were still skeptical, but now their skepticism was mixed with a new, grudging respect. Chloe had survived her first challenge. A partnership forged in pressure began to take shape. The days blurred into a whirlwind of work, and Chloe quickly realized that Pierce Vance's mind operated on a completely different plane. It was exhilarating. Their dynamic was unlike anything Chloe had ever experienced. It was an intellectual dance. She would see a path no one else could, a wild, creative solution born from seeing patterns where others saw chaos. Pierce, with his sharp, incisive mind, would instantly grasp its potential, refining it, weaponizing it, and turning it into a corporate strategy that left their competitors scrambling. Their nights were spent in his vast corner office, the city lights twinkling below them like a fallen constellation. Whiteboards were filled with her frantic diagrams and his bold, decisive handwriting. They existed on a diet of strong coffee and take-out pizza, consumed over stacks of blueprints and market analysis reports. It was during these quiet moments that the wall between CEO and advisor began to crumble into dust. "So," Pierce said one night, pointing his pen at a complex doodle in the corner of her notepad, "is that part of the plan for the Pacific Rim expansion, or are you just drawing flowers?" She blushed, a rare occurrence now that she was growing more confident. "It's a fractal, a geometric pattern that repeats at every scale. It's calming. It reminds me that even the most complex systems are born from simple, repeating rules." He looked at her, truly looked at her, his gaze thoughtful. "You see the world in patterns, don't you?" "Don't you?" she asked, genuinely curious. "I see it in objectives," he admitted, his voice quieter than she was used to. "In wins and losses. You see the machinery behind it all." She learned about the immense pressure he was under from the board, the weight of a family legacy he both honored and resented. He learned about her quiet life, her love of old books, and the online puzzle communities where she was a minor celebrity under an anonymous username. They discovered a shared sense of isolation, his born from power, hers from being perpetually misunderstood. The admiration that had started with her intellect was slowly, surely, evolving into a deep, personal connection. They were becoming a team, not just in the boardroom, but in the quiet, unguarded hours when the rest of the city was asleep. "We need to go to the Atherton Gala," Pierce announced one afternoon, his focus entirely on a tablet in his hand. "It's the biggest networking event of the season. Our top 3 competitors will be there, including Marcus Thorne. We need to be seen." Chloe's heart sank. A gala? A room full of powerful, polished people in tuxedos and designer gowns making small talk that was really a form of corporate warfare? "Oh, I don't think I have anything to wear for something like that." "I've already taken care of it," he said, still focused on his screen, his tone matter of fact. "My assistant, Clara, has arranged for a stylist to meet you this afternoon. There's a corporate account. Get whatever you need. Shoes, a bag, the works. Just send the receipts to her." He finally looked up from the tablet, his expression unreadable. "Be ready by 8 on Saturday. A car will pick you up." It was a modern fairy godmother moment, delivered with the emotional warmth of a business transaction. Chloe felt a strange mix of gratitude for his foresight and anxiety about the entire ordeal. The stylist, a whirlwind of energy named Isabella, was thankfully kind and intuitive. She listened to Chloe's nervous protests and gently guided her away from the safe, black dresses she gravitated towards. "No, darling, you are not a woman who hides. You are a woman who observes. Let's give them something to observe." She helped Chloe find a dress, an elegant midnight blue gown. It wasn't loud or flashy. It was confident and intelligent. When Saturday came, she met Pierce in the opulent lobby of the hotel where the gala was being held. He was standing with his back to her, talking on the phone, the perfect picture of wealth and power in a classic tuxedo. She took a deep breath, the sound of her heels clicking softly on the marble floor, and walked toward him. "Pierce," she said softly. He turned, a distracted, businesslike look on his face. "Chloe, good. Our car is—" He stopped. The words died in his throat. His eyes traveled from her elegant updo down the simple, perfect line of her dress to the sparkling heels on her feet. The mask of the focused CEO vanished completely. The phone in his hand lowered to his side. He was, for the first time since she'd met him, utterly speechless. He wasn't looking at his brilliant advisor or the clumsy server from the pantry. He was looking at a beautiful, captivating woman, and the surprise and admiration on his face were so genuine, so unguarded, that it made Chloe's heart skip a beat.
The Atherton Gala was an ocean of champagne, quiet music, and powerful people. For the first hour, Chloe felt like she was playing a role, holding a glass of sparkling water and trying to look like she belonged in a world where a single piece of jewelry could pay off her old student loans. Pierce, however, was a master in his element. He navigated the room with effortless grace. But he did something she didn't expect. He kept her by his side. He introduced her not as his advisor, but as his chief strategist for the Odyssey project, a title that made her feel a surge of pride and solidified her position to anyone watching. It was a powerful investor, a gregarious man named Sterling, who created the moment that shifted the entire evening. He clapped Pierce on the shoulder, his eyes twinkling at Chloe. "Vance, you sly dog. You always have the best strategy, but I didn't realize that extended to your personal life. You two make quite the power couple." "Oh no, Mr. Sterling, you misunderstand. We're just colleagues. I work for Mr. Vance." Sterling waved a dismissive hand, clearly not believing them for a second. Of course. Keep it professional." He winked and walked away, leaving a trail of charged silence in his wake. The air between them was suddenly thick with unspoken thoughts. "Power couple," Pierce repeated softly, a strange, unreadable look in his eye. He seemed more flustered than she was. Later, the orchestra began to play a slow waltz, and Pierce's expression became grimly determined. "We have to dance," he said, his voice a low command. "Sterling is watching. Not dancing would be more conspicuous than dancing." He led her to the floor and pulled her gently into his arms. The sudden proximity was electric. Her hand rested on the fine wool of his tuxedo jacket. His hand was firm and warm on the small of her back. They moved together, surrounded by the city's elite. The conversation around them faded away. For a few minutes, they weren't a CEO and a strategist. They were just a man and a woman, caught in the illusion of being a couple, an illusion that was starting to feel dangerously, wonderfully real. The gala paid dividends, but not just in business. The rumor of Pierce Vance's mysterious and beautiful power couple partner spread like wildfire. Their success made waves, and the competition grew nervous. Whispers about Pierce's new secret weapon echoed through the industry. Marcus Thorne, CEO of their chief competitor, became particularly obsessed, tasking his people with finding out everything they could about the woman who had appeared out of nowhere. The pressure on the Odyssey project intensified in response. The client, likely prodded by Thorne's lobbyists, called an emergency meeting. They presented a new, unexpected environmental regulation that threatened to derail the entire supply chain for Phase 2. It was a direct challenge, a targeted attack on their strategy, and they had 48 hours to respond. In the boardroom, the mood was grim. Pierce paced like a caged tiger, while his engineers and lawyers argued in circles. The regulation seemed airtight, a perfect trap. Chloe, however, was calm. She had spent the last 24 hours doing what she did best, diving into the data. She had read every line of the new regulation, but she had also cross-referenced it with obscure local bylaws and aerial zoning maps she'd found in an online municipal database. "They've given us a cage," she said quietly, her voice cutting through the panicked arguments, "but they left the door open at the top." All eyes turned to her. The new regulation applies to land-based transport of construction materials within a 50-mile radius of the protected zones. It says nothing about aerial transport. If we use heavy-lift drones for the most sensitive, prefabricated components and deliver them directly to the construction sites from a staging area outside the radius, we bypass the regulation entirely. It's more expensive up front, but it's faster, quieter, and it turns their new rule into a public relations win for us. We can brand it as the greenest infrastructure project in the country. Pierce stopped pacing. The corner of his mouth twitched upwards into a slow, admiring smile. It was another game-changing solution, turning an attack into an advantage. He looked at Chloe, and the pride in his eyes was clear for everyone to see. And across the city, Marcus Thorne, after being briefed on his team's failure to find a loophole, knew he could no longer fight the strategy. He had to get the strategist.
The second gala was the annual Foundation Ball, an event even more exclusive and high stakes than the first. The bid for the Odyssey project was in its final stages, and this was the last chance for the major players to lobby and posture before the decision was made. Chloe, now more confident in this glittering world, wore a striking emerald green dress that brought out the fire in her eyes. She and Pierce moved through the room as a true team, their earlier awkwardness replaced by a comfortable, powerful synergy that made them the undeniable center of attention. But Chloe could feel someone watching her all night, Marcus Thorne. He was handsome, slick, and radiated a predatory charm. He finally made his move when Pierce was pulled away by a government official, leaving Chloe momentarily alone near the terrace. "Chloe," he said, appearing at her side with 2 glasses of champagne. His smile was dazzling, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Marcus Thorne, I've been admiring your work from afar." "Mr. Thorne," Chloe replied politely, her posture poised as she declined the glass with a small shake of her head. "I mean, you've been admiring Mr. Vance's work." He chuckled, a low, dismissive sound. "Let's be honest, Vance was a predictable, if effective sledgehammer before you showed up. You're the one who's turned this whole competition on its head. He's a brilliant executor, I'll give him that, but you're the visionary. The thing is, Chloe, visionaries shouldn't be standing in the shadows. At my company, you wouldn't be an advisor, you'd be a senior partner. We'll build an entire department around you. Name your price. I'll double whatever he's paying you, and I'll add a signing bonus with 7 figures. All you have to do is give me one good reason why the Odyssey bid from Vance Engineering might be flawed." It was a staggering offer, a temptation of wealth and power designed to test the ambition and ego he assumed every brilliant person had. Chloe looked Marcus Thorne directly in the eye, a calm, unreadable expression on her face. The woman who would have been flustered and intimidated just a few months ago was gone. In her place was a strategist who understood the game being played. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice clear and firm, the sound cutting through the ambient music of the gala. "I appreciate the generous offer, but some things, like loyalty and integrity, aren't for sale. I believe in the project we're building, and I believe in the team I'm a part of. And a visionary," she added, a sharp edge to her voice, "would never betray her own vision. Now, if you'll excuse me." She gave him a small, dismissive nod and turned her back on him, leaving him standing there with his 2 glasses of champagne and a look of stunned disbelief. From across the ballroom, half hidden in the shadows of a marble column, Pierce had seen it all. He had seen Marcus approach her, the slick charm, the intense conversation. A cold knot of fear had tightened in his stomach. He knew the kind of offer Thorne could make, an offer designed to turn anyone's head. He watched as Chloe listened, her expression poised. He saw her speak, her posture unwavering, and he saw Marcus Thorne's confident smirk vanish, replaced by shock. He watched her turn her back and walk away with a quiet dignity that was more powerful than any shouting match. His heart swelled with an emotion so powerful it almost knocked the air from his lungs. It was more than admiration for her mind. It was more than respect for her character. He waited for a moment for his composure to return, then pushed off the column and walked toward her. She was standing alone by a balcony, overlooking the city lights, looking thoughtful. "Chloe," he said softly as he came to a stop beside her. She turned, a small, genuine smile on her face. "Pierce, I saw," he interrupted, his voice thick with an emotion she had never heard from him before. "I saw what you did." I shook his head in wonder, his eyes searching her face. "You are the biggest surprise of my life." And before she could respond, before her brain could process what was happening, he closed the small distance between them, cupped her face in his hands, and kissed her.
The kiss changed everything. It was a silent acknowledgement of everything that had been building between them. The late nights, the shared victories, the unspoken admiration, the electric tension. When they broke apart, the noisy gala around them seemed to fade into a distant hum. The questions, the doubts, the pretense, it all melted away, leaving only a simple, profound truth. They were a team, a partnership in every sense of the word. They left the gala soon after, a quiet understanding passing between them in the car ride back. There were no grand declarations, no immediate need to define what had just happened. It was simply settled. The final weeks before the Odyssey project decision were the most intense yet, but now their work was fueled by a new, powerful current. The partnership that had been forged in pressure was now sealed by affection. Their brainstorming sessions were electric, filled with an easy intimacy that made them even more effective. They could finish each other's sentences, anticipate each other's thoughts. The work was still grueling, the stakes still impossibly high, but it no longer felt like a burden. It felt like a shared mission. Chloe had never felt more confident. Pierce had never felt more inspired. He trusted her instincts completely, and she trusted her leadership implicitly. They were two parts of a single, brilliant mind, now connected by a shared heart. They stood before the final selection committee to give their presentation. The room was sterile, the faces of the committee members impassive. But Chloe and Pierce were not nervous. They moved as one, a seamless unit of logic and passion. Pierce presented the powerful, data-driven strategy, and Chloe explained the elegant, human-centric logic behind it, her voice clear and steady. Their synergy was undeniable. They weren't just presenting a plan. They were telling the story of a future they had built together, a future they both passionately believed in. When they finished, there was a long, heavy silence in the room, the kind that precedes a monumental decision. They waited. The 2 days after the final presentation were the longest of Chloe's life. The entire office was on edge, the air thick with a mixture of hope and anxiety. Every phone call, every email notification made people jump. Pierce was a mask of calm control, attending meetings and making calls as if it were any other day. But Chloe could see the tension in his jaw, the way his eyes kept flicking to his phone. They had done everything they could. They had presented a flawless case. Now it was out of their hands. They were in his office late Wednesday afternoon, reviewing preliminary plans for a different project, a futile attempt to distract themselves, when his private line buzzed. It was a number he had been waiting for, the direct line to the chairman of the selection committee. He answered, putting the call on speaker. "Pierce Vance?" The chairman's voice was formal. "Mr. Vance, we have concluded our deliberations. I'm calling to inform you," there was a torturous pause, "that the board has voted unanimously. Congratulations, Vance Engineering has been awarded the Odyssey project." For a moment, there was just the sound of their breathing. Then Pierce let out a long, slow exhale, a sound of pure relief. "Thank you, Chairman.
We're honored." He ended the call, and a wide, brilliant smile broke across his face. He looked at Chloe, and the joy in his eyes was so immense it was contagious. The news spread through the company like a shockwave. The hallways erupted in cheers and applause. Champagne corks popped. People were hugging, celebrating the victory that had seemed impossible just a few months ago. Amidst the chaos, Pierce made his way through the crowd to Chloe's office. He closed the door, shutting out the noise. For a moment, they just stood there grinning at each other in the quiet. All the pressure, all the sleepless nights had led to this. "We did it," she whispered, her voice full of awe. "No," he corrected her, his eyes shining with pride and something much deeper. "You did it, Chloe." He stepped forward and pulled her into a heartfelt embrace. It wasn't the passionate kiss of the gala, but something more profound. It was a hug of shared victory, of deep gratitude, and the promise of everything yet to come.
A few weeks later, once the celebratory chaos had subsided and the initial project mobilization was underway, Pierce called Chloe into his office. The temporary nameplate on her door was gone. "This advisor role was always temporary," he began, his tone formal, but his eyes were warm and full of affection. "It was a means to an end. We've won. Now we have to build. The board has approved the creation of a new, permanent department, effective immediately. The Strategy Department. It will be the nerve center of this company for the next 50 years. And it needs a leader. Someone with vision, with integrity, someone who sees the patterns no one else does." He slid a heavy, leather-bound folder across his desk. Inside was a contract. Her new title was Executive Vice President, Head of Strategy. It was a permanent, powerful position at the very top of the company she had started serving coffee in. Her journey was complete. The story, however, was just beginning. Months later, on a sun-drenched autumn day, Chloe stood opposite Pierce, not in a boardroom, but in a beautiful garden filled with their closest friends and family. She wore an elegant white dress, and he wore a look of absolute devotion that made her heart feel like it might float away. The world knew him as Pierce Vance, the titan of industry who had won the impossible contract. But she knew him as the man who had seen past her clumsy exterior and recognized the mind within, the man who had challenged and championed her. And he knew her as the brilliant, captivating woman who had stumbled into his life and rearranged his entire world for the better. As they exchanged their vows, they both knew this was their greatest partnership, a permanent merger, a lifelong contract, sealed not with the signature, but with a kiss. The accidental ace and the CEO who was smart enough to see her value had finally found their happily ever after.
I hope you enjoyed this story. Please tell us how you rate it from 0 to 10. Hey, subscribe to be notified when we release new stories. Click the like button and share with anyone you think might also like it. See you next time.